Good morning, everyone. We're still going through the book of Daniel, and today, chapter 2. So, the basic layout of Daniel is, of course, that, the Babylonian Empire, basically in several different stages, brought people from Judea into exile. And Daniel was one of the first group. And so part of what Babylon did was they kind of took the cream of the crop of Israel, and brought them into their empire to kind of serve the emperor and whatever else. And of course, this serves several purposes. If you get the best from the various countries that you rule, and they become loyal to your empire, then it's a win-win, because you could send them back and to rule in your stead, or as a vassal state, and a whole bunch of things. So Daniel and 3 of his buds are part of this crew. Okay, and so I mentioned their Hebrew names in the introduction, right? And so they're there, except the diet violates how the Jewish people are supposed to eat according to the Old Covenant law. Now, what I don't understand is they decided to go full vegetarian. And maybe that was just a way to ensure that that would be the case. So, they present this sort of thing. Let's do this trial, and if it works out okay, then, hey, okay, can we continue doing it? And so they did this kind of trial for 10 days. You eat, as you eat, and we'll see how you look and how your health is. And so their handler, the steward over them in the empire, in the king's court, said, wow, you guys look healthier and better. So there it is, right? So as this is happening, Daniel continues to rise in esteem because he's somebody who's talented and has a lot of skills. So in this way, it's kind of similar to Joseph in the book of Genesis, right? He's recognized for a lot of his skills and abilities. And so there'll be some parallels that take place between Joseph in Genesis and Daniel in Daniel. In chapter 2, he's going to need to interpret a dream. But how did it go with Joseph, right? Of course, Joseph is in prison, and the ruler says, well, hey, I have this dream, and nobody could figure out what it is. So, the baker says, I remember this one guy, and he predicted something, and it happened. So they yank him out of prison, and he tells him in the dream, and he interprets it, and oh, wow. And then he becomes, in a sense, manager of the famine that he predicted. Something similar, but the stakes are higher and crazier in Daniel 2, right? And so, in a sense, it's so crazy that it's one of those things where you have to go, it's too insane not to be true. And when we get there, you'll see why, okay? So we'll want to turn to Daniel chapter 2, and let's read the first 9 verses, okay? Most of us are probably aware of the dream that he had and what it represents, at least in part. We may have forgotten some of it, but okay? So, chapter 2, verses 1 through 9. In the 2nd year of the reign of Nebuchadnezzar, Nebuchadnezzar had dreams. His spirit was troubled, and his sleep left him. Then the king commanded that the magicians, the enchanters, and sorcerers, and the Chaldeans he summoned to tell the king his dreams. So he's kind of bringing in all the guys that are supposed to kind of know this stuff, right? They're part of his, if you want to say, cabinet. I don't know if that's the proper term. But, when you're in charge of an empire, you have a lot of people who are kind of in your circle, and you call upon them as needed. Okay? So he's having some dreams, and he says, well, I want to see if this is of anything of significance. So they came in and stood before the king. And the king said to them, I had a dream, and my spirit is troubled to know the dream. Then the Chaldeans said to the king in Aramaic, and this is where the rest of it goes to Aramaic until chapter 7. Okay? O king, live forever. tell your servants the dream, and we will show the interpretation. The king answered and said to the Chaldeans, the word for me is firm. If you do not make known to me the dream and its interpretation, you shall be torn limb from limb, and your houses shall be laid in ruins. I mean, it's a little absurd, isn't it? You mean you want me to tell you your dream and interpret it? I mean, in a sense, if you could say it to the emperor and not get torn limb from limb, you would say, what am I, God? I mean, hey, you know, you're asking me, are you just coming up with this because you don't like me and you want to get rid of me? I mean, this is absurd. But why do you think he would do this? What we don't know is the backstory of how many bad interpretations probably happened, right? And so he's saying, well, if they could tell me, if one of my advisors can tell me what the dream is, then I'll believe him on its interpretation, because he's able to know what he shouldn't be able to know. That is, I think, is what's going on. It doesn't say that, but why else would he come up with something so absurd that everyone would say, you know, is beyond the pale, all right? And he's threatening them with their life. So that'll motivate them to say something, right? So, but if you show the dream and its interpretation, you shall receive from me gifts and rewards with great honor. Great. What are you going to have to go through? 1 million different interpreters before one finally gets it right by random? Right? We're not going to talk about Daniel yet. Therefore, show me the dream and its interpretation. They answered a second time and said, let the king tell its servants the dream, and we will show its interpretation. They're hoping maybe right? It's kind of like a little kid. Keep asking, and all right. So, I know with certainty that you are trying to gain time, because you see that the word from me is firm. If you do not make the dream known to me, there is but one sentence for you. You have agreed to speak, lying and corrupt words before me till the times change. See? Now this starts to open the doors to, right? Okay. Therefore, tell me the dream, and I shall know that you can show me its interpretation. I think he's going to have a whole bunch of new staff. And the problem is, if he does get rid of all of the staff, will anybody want to come to help the emperor? I think you would hide whatever skills you have, because why do I want to go there? Just to be killed because he's not happy with what I'm doing. All right? So, wow. So it's kind of crazy. Okay? Couple things. Okay. Troubled. Pa'am. So that just kind of says that he's deeply disturbed and agitated by it. Troubled can carry that. But troubled may be less than that. But so he's bothered enough to kind of do this ridiculous sort of demand. So he's hoping that some way it'll pay off, because he knows it's ridiculous. But as it was kind of implied, he was burned in the past. And so whatever he dreamt, to him is too important just to let it be. He wants to know what it really means. Okay? So, yeah, okay. And so now everything is in Aramaic, and I looked up some of the words, and it's, some of them are almost identical to the Hebrew, so they're close. It's a close language. So it wasn't that. It's like, let me see what that is. And it's like, oh, well, that's So, okay, and so the Masoretes even kind of pointed the Aramaic. Hey, what can you do with that? Okay, so let's hear the next section then. I title it The Wise Men's Despair. Who are the wise men? The magicians, the magi. Okay, so 10 through 13. All right?
Quick question.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So magicians and whatever, but then there's the Chaldeans that's capitalized.
Yeah. Well, that's really, Aramaic really comes from them. But Aramaic is now the lingua franca of the area. So I guess they happen to be Chaldeans. But,
Smart Chaldeans
Yeah, but you don't have to be Chaldean to serve in the court, but in this case, they were Chaldeans.
Okay.
So it was kind of synonymous, so, but,
In, let's see, the verse 4 of chapter 1, under the,
mhm.
it says that Chaldeans is the ancient name for Babylonians.
Hmm.
Their language was Akkadian,
Okay.
written in cuneiform.
Well, that was before, because now it's Aramaic.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Interesting.
So, wow. The Chaldeans answered the king and said, "There is not a man on earth who could meet the king's demand, for no great and powerful king has asked such a thing of any magician or enchanter or Chaldean." Are they or he? I don't know whether this is the Chaldeans' answer. So this is really the group. Are they not speaking the truth? I would say yes. I mean, it's an absurd demand, right? Not if you want to keep your staff, right? So, but he's saying, hey, you're asking something impossible for us to do. The thing that the king asks is difficult. Okay. How is he talking? Of course, this is kind of courtly Aramaic. So, really, it's really impossible, but he's saying it as politely as he can. It's difficult, right? Kind of interesting to kind of see that. The kind of the use of language here, right? So the thing the king asks is difficult, and no one can show it to the king except the gods whose dwelling is not with flesh, right? So you're asking something that only a god can do. And you see how they're kind of they're speaking to him. See, the thing the king asks, they're not saying what you, but they're always referring to him as the king, right? So they're still maintaining the proper decorum and speech and everything else. So, because of this, the king was angry and very furious and commanded that all the wise men of Babylon be destroyed. Let's hope he doesn't actually issue a decree that's irrevocable before this happens, right?
Why is it an all or none thing? It's like all of them are going, and they didn't even, some of them didn't even know about it.
It's ridiculous. It really is. But see, this is he's angry and he says something like this. And he kind of has the power to get away with whatever. See? That's kind of the danger of holding so much power, right? Oh, all of you. And then he'll go, okay, not all. So one of his advisors who's not part of the magicians will say, "Emperor, are you sure?" Right? When he calms down. Okay? So the decree went out, and the wise men were about to be killed. Okay. What kind of decree? I want to know. Because if it's an irrevocable decree, it's going to happen. Okay? And if it's not, he could rescind it. So, and they sought Daniel and his companions to kill them. Okay. Wow. So he's asking Daniel and his companions to do his dirty work. So in other words, at the moment, he respects and honors Daniel and his three companions more than the whole kind of crew of magicians. So he's thinking, these guys at least, what they do is better than what you guys do. And last week when we kind of saw what was going on, you could, if you read between the lines, I would go, if I were part of this group who were here before, I would not be happy with these Johnny-come-latelys, right? Who are kind of rising up in ascendancy. And so it wouldn't be weird if they kind of try to do some stuff to try to drop them down a few pegs. Okay? Well, we kind of know they do, but anyway. So that's what's going on right now. It doesn't look pretty, does it? And so, and I think it's a bad place for Daniel and his, right? Because they have to follow the emperor's order. Or you're going to be in trouble. So it's not, Nobody's happy here, right? At least, that would be my situation. And so let's see what goes on, okay? Because we know that they're not all killed, but that's because we've cheated and we know the story. Okay, so let's press on. We're going to start with verse 14, and we're going to go through 23. Okay, so and I have to find it. Then Daniel replied with prudence. Okay, with care, with great diplomacy. He has to say what he needs to say, but how do I say it in the best way possible, where it'll be acceptable to the emperor? That's kind of what comes with this word prudence, right? He just doesn't blurt something out, eta, right? With prudence and discretion to Arioch, the captain of the king's guard, who had gone out to kill the wise men of Babylon. He declared to Arioch, the king's captain, "Why is the decree of the king so urgent?" Then Arioch made the matter known to Daniel. And Daniel went in and requested the king to appoint him a time that he might show the interpretation to the king. See? So it says that Daniel and his group, and yet who's doing it? So what does this mean? You have the king's guard, but Daniel and his 3 cohorts are supposed to do this, which means that he has a part. He's not officially the king guard supervisor, but for this task, he's given oversight of the king's guard to make sure it happens. So he's trying to intercede, right? He's trying to keep this from happening. Okay. Well, yeah. So there you kind of have what's going on. Okay. So he's saying, well, let's have a little bit of time. So he's hoping, at least emotionally, what is he hoping from the emperor? The text doesn't say this, but probably to cool down. But also, who's probably next in line? Yeah, because all of these guys, and he says, well, you guys have proved yourselves to be trustworthy. Hello? Well, if you're Daniel, it's an impossible task for you too, unless God's going to intervene for you in some way, right? So, but wow, so it's, yeah, okay. So there it is. Then Arioch made the matter known to Daniel, and Daniel went in and requested the king to appoint him a time that he might show the interpretation to the king. So let's wait a little. Maybe something will develop, right? Then Daniel went to his house and made the matter known to Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, also known as Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, okay, his companions, and told them to seek mercy from the God of heaven concerning this mystery. Okay, so, yeah, I have a whole little spiel on the word mystery. We'll kind of look at that, okay? So that Daniel and his companions might not be destroyed with the rest of the wise men of Babylon. Then the mystery was revealed to Daniel in a vision of the night. Then Daniel blessed the God of heaven. Daniel answered, "Blessed be the name of God forever and ever, to whom belong wisdom and might. He changes times and seasons. He removes kings and sets up kings. He gives wisdom to the wise and knowledge to those who have understanding." So this is really a prayer of thanks and praise, right? Because why is he saying, why does the praise sound like this? Because that is what God had done. He had revealed deep and hidden things. In other words, what the king dreamt, right? Yeah. He reveals deep and hidden things. He knows what is in the darkness, and the light dwells in him. To you, O God of my fathers, I give thanks and praise, for you have given me wisdom and might, and have now made known to me what we asked of you. For you have made known to us the king's matter. Wow. So, God gave him a vision. He knows what the situation is, and this is kind of a prayer of thanksgiving. Beautiful prayer, isn't it? But it's steeped in kind of, sounds like the Psalms, and kind of steeped in kind of the The form is very typical of the Old Testament and whatnot, but yeah, it's beautiful, and it's in Aramaic too. So yeah, so the game is now going to change, right? Yeah, let's take a look at mystery. Okay, so we'll appreciate exactly kind of what's hidden in that word. Mystery, so this is Raz, okay, but it's actually a Persian word that's kind of brought into Aramaic. So, I mean, we have words that come from other languages that we use. Sometimes we may not even, like we have a couple Hebrew words, like, whoa, that was a behemoth. That's from Hebrew. It's one of the giant sea creatures that we don't really know what it is, but behemoth. And so, the translators just transliterated it because they didn't know what it was. Same with Leviathan. So we have loan words from other languages, okay? And so this is one of those things. It's not kind of native to Aramaic, okay? But it means secret or mystery. The dreams of kings, Nebuchadnezzar, Babylon contain the word 9 times. So this isn't the first time we're going to come up with this sort of mystery, this thing that's going to have to be dealt with. These mysterious dreams symbolize God's guidance of history toward his kingdom. Okay? Understanding these dreams requires divine revelation. Well, something, right? I mean, because it's not going to happen otherwise. And in Daniel, it certainly does. Okay? Jesus used the link between mystery and kingdom from Daniel in his teachings on God's kingdom in Matthew. Okay? Paul refers to this when discussing God's plan fulfilled in God's rule over the world. So this idea finds its way into the New Testament, and Jesus kind of pulls it in his teaching. Okay? So it also shows up in the Dead Sea Scrolls, right? And some of which are scriptural and some are not. Okay? In this context, that is, the Dead Sea Scrolls, talk about future secrets in God's mysterious ways in heaven. The term refers to secrets spoken by the biblical prophets hinting at divine plans yet to unfold. So this term for mystery really kind of conveys that sense of it's something that no human can know. It's that mysterious. Okay? And so that's what is kind of meant to be conveyed. We're like, oh, wow. It's something that, no one's even going to guess and get right. Like, oh, I know. He always dreams about falling off a cliff and then he wakes up. It's not that, right? It's something that you couldn't guess. And that's what this word kind of conveys to us, which is why there was kind of this political distress or polite distress by the Chaldeans. And Daniel asks for time. Okay? So there it is. Are we ready to continue? So if we turn the page, it's not copyrighted. It's from AI. So, but I guess it's supposed to be accurate. I have no clue. Okay. So the dream revealed. Let's look at verses 24 through 35. So this is we're covering a little bit of real estate here in this section. Okay? So, then Arioch brought in Daniel before the king in haste, and said thus to him, I have found among the exiles from Judah a man who will make known to the king the interpretation. So, if you're part of the king's court, you'd probably want this solved fairly soon. Because you're thinking, what if his anger gets lashed out on other people, right? So, I don't want to become a victim to his anger because I happen to be nearby. And no one could kind of solve his conundrum. Okay? So he kind of moves with haste and says, King, right? The king declared to Daniel, whose name was Belshazzar, okay, are you able to make known to me the dream that I have seen and its interpretation? Daniel answered the king and said, no wise men, enchanters, magicians, or astrologers can show to the king the mystery that the king has asked. But there is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries. And he has made known to King Nebuchadnezzar what will be in the latter days. Okay. So he's giving credit where credit is due. I suppose he could have just pretended he did it, but I wouldn't do that because, hello, God really pulled you out of a pinch, right? And you're going to go, and now you're going to like backstab God when he just saved you? I don't think so, right? So, I mean, this would be contrary to his faith anyway. But I mean, if only from a pragmatic sense, right? You'd have to really be short-sighted to do something like that. Okay? So he made known to King Nebuchadnezzar what will be in the latter days. Right there, what does that tell you? The dream deals with more than just what's happening today, latter days, right? So, okay. Your dream and the visions of your head as you lay in bed are these. To you, O king, as you lay in bed came thoughts of what would be after this. And he who reveals mysteries made known to you what is to be. But as for me, this mystery has been revealed to me, not because of any wisdom that I have, more than all the living, but in order that the interpretation may be known to the king, and that you may know the thoughts of your mind. Okay, well, all right, well, let's spill the beans. So, couple things. Daniel gives credit where credit is due. Okay, and as I kind of mentioned earlier, it just kind of makes sense. Okay, well, it's going to be basically the king dreamt something like this, and he's going to have to say, what does it mean? Okay, and he'll get into the very specifics, right? But the latter days, the dream concerns the future. The Aramaic phrase is equivalent to the Hebrew expression that points forward to the age of messianic fulfillment. And so it's virtually identical to the Hebrew. So unless Aramaic somehow had a different shade of meaning, I would say it means exactly the same thing. Okay? And so I looked it up in these other places, and it's like, it's the same thing. Okay? So other than that it's Aramaic, and that's cool, I didn't see any difference. Okay? Now maybe, one of our language experts from the seminary or something can, right? So we have our Hebrew experts, but also a couple are kind of also good in Aramaic. Okay? Not me. Just letting you know. I'm not one of them. Okay? So I kind of scrawl at a second grade level. Okay? Okay. So let's get to the interpretation. Okay? That's 36 through 45. Or 20, yeah. Okay? So here we go. If I can find the verse. Okay, here we go. Well, I must have, okay. Yeah, so I stopped. So you saw, O king, and behold, a great image. This image, mighty and of exceeding brightness, stood before you, and its appearance was frightening. The head of this image was of fine gold, its chest and arms of silver, its middle and thighs of bronze, its legs of iron, its feet partly of iron and partly of clay. Okay. As you looked, the stone was cut out by no human hand, and it struck the image on its feet of iron and clay. Okay? And broke them to pieces. Well, if you're going to strike this, right, it's a giant statue, right? And if you're going to strike it, where would it be its weakest? In right where it's iron and clay. See, so iron alone is pretty strong. Right? Now, gold isn't strong, but, so you can kind of see that gold is at the top, and it's the most precious of the metals, and then, of course, you have bronze, but you can kind of see is that the farther down you go, the stronger metal it is, until you get to the feet, which is a weird, wonky combination of clay and iron, which is not strong, so you hit it, right? It probably shatters like pottery, right? Who knows, it would be shards and all right, but there it is. So, but it says, how was the stone described? A stone was cut by no human hand. Okay, that's a clue, isn't it? Yeah, see. So this is and so often that's referred to, right? No human hand, that's a euphemism for God. Okay? And it struck the image on the feet of iron clay and broke them in pieces. Then the iron, the clay, the bronze, the silver, and the gold all together were broken in pieces and became like the chaff of summer threshing floors, and the wind carried them away so that not a trace of them could be found. But the stone that struck the image became a great mountain and filled the whole earth. So if this stone not made by human hands, right, kind of struck this giant statue, and it collapsed, right, broke, but now this became a great mountain. So this is what, this is kind of the imagery of, a great mountain where all the peoples will come, right? Isaiah is full of that, okay? Of choice wine, well refined, I think is how the ESV translates this, okay? So that's what the image was. Now, Daniel's spot on because the king will be happy, right? So now he knows, you actually do know what I dreamt, okay? So let's continue onward, okay? This was the dream. Now we will tell you, the king, its interpretation. What's with the we? It's hard to figure that one out, right? So is it he and his three companions, or he and the we includes God? Because God informed him. So I'm inclined to say the we means he and God, and that he and his companions aren't relaying this, but God is really using Daniel as his mouthpiece. Okay? So, now we will tell you, the king, its interpretation. Now, O king, the king of kings, to whom God of heaven has given the kingdom, the power and the might and the glory, and into whose hand he has given, wherever they dwell, the children of man, the beasts of the field, the birds of the heavens, making you rule over them all. You are the head of gold. So he's saying, yeah, you're the top of the statue, gold, right, the most precious, right, metal, but not the strongest one. Okay, so it kind of makes sense. So in a sense, it's not, you would normally think, oh, it's from the ground up, but it's from the top down. Okay, so it's a little backwards is what we would think, right? Because, oh, well, you're the foundation of something, but no, okay? But the thing is that the metals below the gold are actually stronger, okay? Which may mean that, well, I won't say anything right now. Okay, so let's continue on. But he basically said, you're the gold piece on the statue, but who's over you? The God who gave me the ability to interpret your dream. I mean, that he starts off with that. Okay, so, okay. Another kingdom inferior to you shall rise after you, and yet a third kingdom of bronze, which shall rule over all the earth. Okay. And there shall be a fourth kingdom, strong as iron, because iron breaks to pieces and shatters all things. And like iron that crushes, it shall break and crush all these. And you saw the feet and toes, partly of potter's clay and partly of iron, and it shall be a divided kingdom, but some of the firmness of iron shall be in it. So just as you saw iron mixed with the soft clay, as the toes of the feet were partly iron and partly clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly brittle. As you saw the iron mixed with clay, so they will mix with one another in marriage, but they will not hold together, just as iron does not mix with clay. But it doesn't start out that way, does it? Starts out as iron, right? And in the days of those kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom that shall never be destroyed, nor shall the kingdom be left to another people. It shall break in pieces all these kingdoms, and bring them to an end, and it shall stand forever. Just as you saw that the stone was cut from a mountain by no human hand, and that it broke in pieces the iron, the bronze, the clay, the silver, and the gold. A great God has made known to the king what shall be after this. The dream is certain, and its interpretation sure. So he's describing 4 different empires. I'm going to say empires because the way that Daniel speaks is that it's not it covers all the earth, which is hyperbole, but it's an empire governing groups of people in a large area of land. Okay? So I, on the top of page 4, I'll share with you, this is not my interpretation, but I believe it's the best because the Eastern Church holds a different interpretation. Okay? But this is the best one because at the very tail end, it's really talking about the kingdom of God, in a sense, destroying these. When does that happen? At least in a sense, metaphorically, where the kingdom of God comes to earth and what? Defeat sin, death, and the devil, of course. Right, the victory's not complete until the last day. But I mean, all of this really is messianic, saying, really pointing to when Christ will come to earth and establish his kingdom to rule forever and ever. And no earthly kingdom will overpower it because it lasts forever. That is Rome, right? That's when Christ came. That's when these events happened. So, it makes the best sense to go, well, that one's fairly clear. And then the other ones, well, we know it starts with Nebuchadnezzar because Daniel says so. And so we can just kind of follow, well, who are the kind of the big empires before Rome, right? So the Eastern Church, if you look at this entire thing, head of gold, everyone says that's King Nebuchadnezzar. Chest of arms and silver, everyone says the inferior kingdom will arise after Babylon. So, so this is the Medes and Persians. But, the Medes were kind of one thing, and then the Medes and the Persians, so the Eastern Church kind of splits this up and says the belly of thighs, that's the Persians, and then the leg of iron and feet of clay are the Greeks. Okay? But that doesn't make sense based on that, the last part. So, this is really the Western interpretation, and it makes the best sense. So I'm just sharing with you that, that there's another interpretation or understanding that really involves the other half of Christianity. Okay? But yeah, so head of gold, we know it's Nebuchadnezzar. Daniel said it. Okay? Chest of arms and silver, an inferior kingdom that will arise after Babylon. Silver is harder than gold, but it's really not a battle, right? Okay? Most often understood to be the Medo-Persian Empire. That was pretty powerful, right? But Alexander the Great, wow, right? Yeah. So he basically rules everything until Rome, right? And Rome takes over and doesn't go far east as Alexander the Great did, but Rome ruled more of Europe and goes into Britain. So, but it still covers the entire Middle East, Mediterranean basin. All of these empires ruled the promised land. Okay, so yeah, so you have and then the Roman Empire. Now, and it even makes sense because the Roman Empire, what ends up happening? So with Alexander the Great, he rules this vast empire and he dies, and then it gets split into 4 smaller kingdoms by the generals, and then they end up fighting, not 2. See, Rome splits into 2 kingdoms. The west based in Rome and the east based in Constantinople. And so the one in Constantinople at the time it was Byzantium. Okay, it's named Constantinople after Constantine later on. So it would be Byzantium. And there were times when the eastern part actually went in and kind of came into the west and kind of cleaned up stuff because the west was really bad off. But yeah, so the officially the Eastern Roman Empire, when does it fall? Continues to shrink over time, where it's only a city, right? And so it kind of stands as kind of a big bulwark against the kind of the Islam invasion, even though they just bypassed it, Constantinople, and right. But its defenses were very well fortified. So it's when Constantinople fell. Was it in the 1400s or something? I don't remember the exact date, but it was yeah. So that was the last vestige of the Eastern Roman Empire. So, and it wasn't an empire; that it was just a city, right? Yeah. Okay. So there you have it. And I think kind of the Western's understanding of it is the best. It makes the most sense based on history. And so that's the one we're going with, okay? Well, what do you think Nebuchadnezzar is going to do? You're the man, right? So I will make you second greatest in all the kingdom. Well, we don't know, right? But that's what was done with Joseph. But there's going to be a promotion involved, something. Because if you're the emperor, you want this guy. You do. Because he has delivered on several occasions when no one else could. Okay? So you're like, hey, I'm keeping this guy. You know, he may worship a weird god, but I'm cool with that. Because he and his God deliver. And so Nebuchadnezzar will actually have a momentary change of heart, but then he'll go back to being a pagan. Okay, so let's continue on, verses 46 through 49. Okay. Then King Nebuchadnezzar fell upon his face and paid homage to Daniel, and commanded that an offering and incense be offered up to him. The king answered and said to Daniel, "Truly your God is God of gods and Lord of kings, and revealer of mysteries, for you have been able to reveal this mystery." Okay. Then the king gave Daniel high honors and many great gifts, and made him ruler over the whole province of Babylon, and the chief prefect over all the wise men of Babylon. Okay. So, so here you have this empire, but he's actually now kind of like the governor of the heart of the empire. Nebuchadnezzar is of the entire kingdom, empire. But he, which means concerning Babylon itself, he answers directly to Nebuchadnezzar. Okay? And he's now in charge. I don't know who was in charge before, but I'm sure he's not a happy camper. Right? Because it's like, well, hey, wait, I don't know anything about dreams, but I was running Babylon well for you. Right? So we don't know what came of this, but I'm sure he would not be happy, because he was shuffled off to some other job. Okay? But, yeah. Okay. So, but it doesn't matter, because what the emperor says is. Okay? Yeah. So, high honors, etc., etc. Daniel made a request of the king, and he appointed Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. See? Now they're what? Babylonian or Chaldean names. Okay? So, because now, what are they going to be doing? They're going to be part of the king's kind of court, and so, yeah, okay, over the affairs of the province of Babylon. But Daniel remained at the king's court. So now he's kind of his three compatriots. They're kind of his underlings who will help him, and if they're competent, and if they're loyal, and if they're honest, they'll be a great help. From what we know, they are. Okay, so this will make life a lot easier for Daniel, because he could rely on these guys. Okay, they're highly intelligent. Okay, they kind of have the same world that he has, worldview. They participated in only eating vegetables. So, there's very little difference on how they view things and how they would respond. Okay. So what's Nebuchadnezzar's response? Okay. He falls prostrate before Daniel and honors him by commanding that an offering and incense be presented to him. So I would almost, I would have thought, we all know what happened, but part of me says, I would have thought that Daniel would have said, well, king, really it needs to go to God, not me, because he was the one, right? And maybe something like that was said and it wasn't recorded. I don't know. But, but Nebuchadnezzar does know how Daniel knew his dream and how he could interpret it, right? And we know historically, it's kind of dream stuff, but it's kind of like, well, when we follow history, yeah, right? We can see who follows who and what happens at the tail end. It makes sense that it's Rome, and you have a divided empire. Christ comes along, and right? He establishes his kingdom, which will rule over everything, okay? So that all kind of fits together, okay? So Daniel is elevated to a prominent position, given many gifts, and made ruler over the entire province of Babylon and chief prefect over all the wise men of Babylon. So they weren't killed. But do you think they're happy? Like, well, you know, it depends. Some may go, well, I'm glad I didn't die. But he's young. He's from a conquered people. They're not happy. I mean, they're still going to grouse about this. Oh, I'm glad that, you know, he had enough integrity and la 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 la. So they'll have gratitude for a week or so, right? And then, as Luther said, gratitude is one of the shortest lived of human emotions. So yeah, that'll happen. But what will bother them the most is they're no longer in their prominent place of prestige and influence. They're under Daniel. In a sense, Daniel controls if they get to see the emperor. Oh man, you're going to have a whole lot of people angry underneath you. And all it takes is a few bad ones who have connections. Do these guys have connections? Oh yeah, right? They're Chaldean. This is their home. They've been in power a while. They know all these people. Daniel may be over them, and he'll get his way, and the emperor, whatever, but what happens underneath? There could be a whole lot of nonsense going on. So we haven't seen the last of this. And I'm just saying, just pretend you don't know anything else. It's just kind of obvious that there's going to be payback. The question is, how and when? Because, you know, they want it. Okay? So Nebuchadnezzar's act of falling prostrate and commanding offerings for Daniel is a significant moment of recognition and honor, showing a pagan king's acknowledgement of the true God. He didn't worship the true God, but he acknowledged him, acknowledged God, and said, you know, the true God is the, right? So in a sense, his eyes were open to go, well, hey, he's not just like any other deity that other people, because nobody else can do what Daniel did. Okay? This moment where earthly power recognizes divine revelation sets the stage for the following chapters, where faith and divine wisdom will continue to confront human authority. Now, part of the issue is when you read through the Old Testament is that God doesn't always intercede in history. I mean, even with, think about Elijah, right? So here he was God's prophet, and he's dealing with Ahaz and Jezebel, okay? And he cries out to God, I'm the last one left. There are no other believers, and they're out to kill him, and he goes and hides in a cave, right? So God does intercede, but not always, right? And so we can't go with the expectation that God will always intercede, because he may or may not, okay? As Elijah well knew, okay? So anyways, I don't know if you guys ever read it, but you ever read the account where some young boys, they go out and they make fun of him because he's bald? Oh, it's hilarious. Anyway, they're making fun of Elijah, he's bald and whatever, and they're mocking and jeering him. And while they're doing all that, a bear kind of comes out, and, and they don't see it, and they get mauled by the bear. So anyway, okay. So that was, I'll just share this with you. So that was we get a passage from the Old Testament. We had to just translate it. We didn't know what it was, but that was the passage I got. So I was like, oh, you know, and I didn't know all the words, but it was like, oh, that's the one with that, yeah. So, yeah. All right. Shall we close with prayer? And okay. Our Father, we are very thankful for what you chose to record in your word, including the book of Daniel. There are lots of good bits in there, and may we take it to heart to understand how we may live in a culture and time that is at time, or is often at times, at odds with you. May we learn how to navigate well and in a good way as Daniel did, not compromise his faith and yet show everyone the proper honor, to act in a good way, so that way your name was never besmirched. Grant us such grace and wisdom as we wend our way through our lives today. In our Savior's name we pray. Amen.